right. Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. We are just standing by waiting for Lebang to go and make sure her generator comes on. Poor woman. It's just like yesterday was the first day, and I don't want to jinx it. Yesterday is the first day, probably for a couple of months, that I didn't have load shedding. So I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to spoil the unbroken record of one whole day that our brilliant government haven't ruined electricity for me. But it felt pretty good to not have to, I don't know, sit in the dark. I hope you're having a good start to your Tuesday. I hope you have everything to look forward to today and nothing to fear, because God knows if you've got one thing in your day that you absolutely hate. So usually if I have one thing in my day that I don't like, I like to get it done first. But of course, that's not always possible because the show comes first and there's not much earlier than 6 a.m. on most people's schedules, right? It's funny, some places start late and some places start early. Like Cape Town is not a 6 a.m. place. I don't care what they say. There's just no way. If you if you try to arrange anything in Cape Town before, be a little bit kind, before 9:30, it's not going to happen. That's just not how it works. Snaya just got a notification that we're on stage 4 today. Shit, fuck, ass. I shouldn't have said that. It's right at the very start of the show, because now YouTube are going to downgrade us because you swear too early in the show. It's a problem. Anyway, all right, thanks. Now everybody's joining in on this. Thank you, Yonda. We're on stage 4. Carl says, I spent 50K on an inverter and then we didn't have load shedding for 3 weeks. Felt like I wasn't getting my money's worth. Oh, there'll be a lot of time for you to get your money's worth, Carl. Don't you stress. Another Carl says, stage 4, what a load of shit. Yeah, see, Congo, Chris is blaming me. Damn it, Gareth. Why did you have to jinx it? All right. Sorry, I'll shut up. I'll stop talking about it. It has become our national conversation in some ways, though. And it's so boring. Like, it's really not that interesting to talk about. So we got Lebang joining us in just a moment or two. Let me remind you up front that we have an incredible series that we're doing with Investec at the moment. It is called Future Impact. And what makes the series so interesting is that we've really gone to all corners of South Africa to put this series together. And we've journeyed from rural South Africa to international financial hubs and beyond. We've gathered stories of people and organizations. We've found solutions to our most pressing sustainability challenges. And we've got an 8-part podcast series called Future Impact, which has finally come to an end. But of course, it is available for you, if you haven't heard it yet, to listen as a podcast whenever you like, if you've missed any of the episodes. And my favorite episode about this, because I've talked about it to just about everyone even people who haven't asked, is the one about the rhino sanctuary, which is actually really, really cool. I think it's episode 2 or 3. And it's amazing because Spike went and actually recorded the sounds of these baby rhinos and what sounds they make. And it's incredible. I've never heard a rhino make a noise like that. But entirely apart from that, the project that they focus on in that episode is really doing incredible work. So again, go and take a look from episode 1 to episode 8. A lot of it is really, really fascinating stuff. So go and check Future Impact out. It is brought to you by Investec. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And just in case you don't know, the last episode, the final episode, is all about 3 individuals who've made sustainability their personal mission. And they will help you to discover how you too can make a surprisingly big impact through just a few small personal changes. So go and take a look at that. It'll be very, very cool if you will not only support us by listening to these podcasts, but also give us some feedback. Tell us what you thought of it and send us an email. Tatlejo says, nothing can go wrong for me today. I've been working for 2 hours already. I went for a run and I feel like a mini god. How do you even compete with that? Yeah, well done, dude. That's fantastic. So I'm proud of you, but I'm also a little bit jelly. All right, let's get stuck into today. It feels suddenly as if summer is here and running away with us because before you know it, it's going to be November, and November goes by in the blink of an eye. I don't know what it is. It's just a 30-day month, like so many others, but it's never really a month where you can get a ton of stuff done. And it's maybe because people are already thinking of holidays and everything else. Maybe because the shopping malls are all filled with Christmas decorations, which came up in yesterday's show and made me very nervous and uncomfortable. Because I just don't like the idea of not being the master of my own time, And when it feels to me like things are either going faster than I'd like them to go or slower, and I know it's all an illusion, I get very annoyed and irritated. But if you're ready for all that Boney M music in the shopping malls, in the shopping centers, then I'm afraid it's coming at you, whether you want to or whether you don't want to take part in it, and whether you like it or don't. It's heading right for you, right between the eyes. Before you know it, you're going to be hearing "Feliz Navidad" in the shops, and it's not everybody's favorite. Oh, by the way, look at this lovely little cup and saucer that I got in Turkey. Isn't that nice? Hmm. Perfect for a little espresso first thing in the morning. All right. I do want to start thinking about December, though, because we'll probably be taking a little break with the show over a few days then. And of course, we've got a library of content for you, including lots and lots of really great interviews. But if there's been anything this year that really caught your eye, or your ear in this case, please let us know about it so we can put together some kind of highlights package. And you've got to help us do that. So if there's something you really want to hear, if there's a guest that you really particularly liked, then let us know about it. I would love to hear from you. Michael says, Gareth, why don't you get the guys from Luno back once to talk to us about crypto? I always found they had really great information and weren't always just promoting their special offers like Revix does. Well, Revix are paying at the moment as a client, Michael. They make this podcast and a lot of other things possible, like all our clients do. So, we did a couple of great series with Luno. All of them I'm very proud of in the beginning, but not a bad idea. I'll get them on. But, Revix may well support and promote their own special offers, but they do give us useful information. In fact, just the last update we had 2 weeks ago, I thought was particularly helpful. Gives you a very good idea of what's going on. But okay, I hear you. Loud and clear. Damn it, Gareth. Now I have Feliz Navidad stuck in my head. You see, Congo Chris, this is how easily it happens. And of course, as Sharon says, don't forget Mariah. Yeah, the real Christmas, what would you call her? Like, not Grinch. She's like the secret Christmas elf is Mariah Carey with All I Want for Christmas Is You, which is coming up, right? I mean, it's got to happen at some point. So we've got lots of good things to get into today. We've also got a couple of interesting things that you may or may not expect to hear about, including Jean-Jacques Cornish and Africanalysis. We're going to find out what he thinks is going on in Ethiopia, because there are peace talks happening there at the moment. And I'd like to know what exactly is on the agenda for that, because God alone knows this continent does not need any more conflict than we've already had. Over the past 100 years, it's been enough. So here's a nice bit of feedback. Thank you, Carl. Really enjoyed the interview with Giorgio Dion Hill Lewis while you were away. Give that another one soon. Well, yeah. The minister, the mayor of Cape Town, Jordan Hill Lewis, who's the youngest mayor of Cape Town ever. Fascinating guy, because he really loves public service. Now, I'm nervous and reticent to believe any politician, including the ones who seem super enthusiastic. But this guy seems to be doing an excellent job. There are a lot of people who are very, very happy with the way that Cape Town's being run at the moment. And as I said to him during the interview, and it's worth discussing, there's this huge double standard that happens in South Africa. And I saw it again yesterday in an article published, I think, by Vali Musa. Could be. It was some ANC stalwart where they're drawing like a false equivalence, saying something about, and I only saw the headline, I didn't bother to read it, but something like the ANC and the DA are letting South Africa down. Now, if you've ever been gaslit, then that's it, right? Because sure, the DA is not perfect, but the ANC isn't even competent. Now, you can, as we have on this show, go after the DA for a number of things that they don't do right. There are a number of things that they are really not very good at. You can criticize them for not being, not having created and crafted a utopia in Cape Town yet. But my God, choose any other municipality in the country that the ANC runs and tell me just one thing that they've done right. And then you can say, well, okay, there's maybe a comparison we can make there, but there isn't. And I'm sick to death of seeing, especially ANC supporters, who try to draw this false equivalence in and sneak it in through the back door. Like, well, the ANC may be bad, but you know what? So are all these other parties. They're not as bad. They're not. First of all, they're not in charge of as much. Second of all, that which they are in charge of, they seem to run a whole lot better than the ANC does. So don't draw this false equivalence. It's bullshit, and I'm not going to tolerate it. Not on this show. All right, let's get into it. Here's the gorgeous Lebang Khosana. Oh, I've missed you. How are you, Lebang?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. I've missed you so much. When I heard that you were miles and miles away, I was like, oh, this means I'm not going to see Gareth for a while. So I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back.
Don't lie. You handled everything perfectly in my absence. I got
What?
reports. Oh, people filled me. They told me how good you were and how everything was fine and I don't have to worry and I
Oh,
can go. Basically, they told me I can go on holiday whenever I want, which I love.
really? Somebody
Yeah,
gaslit you.
yeah, big time. So, first of all, how are the tribe of Hosanna children?
The tribe is good. They hid my generator key this morning. So I've just spent the past 20 minutes looking for that. I'm like, wait, why are my lights not working? I'm like, oh yeah, no cheating. Don't worry, I've got a generator. My kids are like, psych. So
Oh
that's
my
why I'm
God.
late. But other than that, dude, they're doing so well. They are just out here making me broke, eating everything in my fridge. And beyond everything, just making me happy. So I'm glad I'm getting a little bit more sleep than I usually do. So I think
Okay,
things are looking up.
that's good
Things are
news.
looking up. Yeah, yeah,
Good. That's awesome. All right,
yeah,
so let's get into a couple of things because there's quite a lot to discuss today, and we've got some headlines coming up in a moment or two. But
yeah.
um, how dependent are you on ratings when making a money-related decision? Is something that you wanted to ask.
Yeah.
I've got to ask. I got to ask something more general because I've just been traveling. So
Mm.
a lot of people leave these reviews on like TripAdvisor or whatever sites you use. I I'm not a big believer in ratings in general. Because
Okay.
I always think that the kind of people who participate in that sort of thing, the people who will go and make a comment on a website about something, very seldom
Mm,
happy people who want to say something nice. Usually they're exactly the same kind of people who will find a reason to complain. Um,
mm.
do you know what I mean? Like
I feel
the
you.
people who participate like to moan. So you never get a balanced
No.
approach. Like the ones who are really happy usually go, "Oh, wow, that was really amazing." And then they move on with their lives. The ones who have an
Mm,
axe to grind or are grumpy or are dissatisfied
mm,
with service or they didn't like
mm.
a place that they went to or a restaurant's food or whatever, I'm going to go and give you a horrible rating. And then they go and moan.
And they do. They do. No, I think traditionally reviews were a place for that, where it's like if you've had a shitty time, go there and tell the world so that nobody else supports the said business establishment or whatever the case. But
Yeah.
over the years, I'm seeing that even people that have had good experiences, and like, I mean like really good experiences, kind of go out of their way to share that as well. Like, yo, this place is dope. You have to come here. Or even if it's buying a product online, like Take a Lot or whatever service you use, they'll put a
Hmm.
5 star and they'll say, I bought this bathroom mat and my life has changed so much. I want this for you too. I kid you not. Like, people are really making an effort to like rate their own experiences. And that I think plays quite a big role in how people are engaging now. Because I won't lie to you, dude. I go to Google reviews immediately. And if there's anything
Really?
like immediately, if it's a restaurant, I check the
Okay.
reviews. If it's a product I'm buying, I check the reviews. On Alibaba.com, I think the
Huh.
reviews are literally what hold that place together. Because, for example, if you're buying a dress, You can even take a picture of yourself in that dress, post that under your review, and then still put your comments and say, see, look how well it fits. This is the size I bought, blah, 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 blah. I think like a lot of decision making, well, for me anyway, I'm noticing is dependent on reviews, which is scary because what if like people are just lying? What if it's like I have a gripe with this person? So,
All right, I hear you, and I think you're probably right, and maybe it's just because I'm old, and I'm willing to accept that that's always a big problem with me. Like I'm old, and I'm not paying attention to the same things that someone who's less jaded and a bit younger and not so grumpy about the world might be able to see. But I really think a lot of these review sites are just forums for complaint, and especially if you look at things like hotel reviews, restaurant reviews, that kind of thing.
mm,
Unfortunately, when someone has a good meal, they pretty much forget about it within seconds of having the good meal. And
mm,
if by chance they write something nice down, they say something kind or thoughtful about it, it's usually short and sharp, and it gets pushed to the bottom of the queue. And it's amazing, like there are now also these bots. I don't know if they're bots or if the restaurants or hotels or
mm,
whatever it is
mm.
actually employ people, but then there are a whole lot of like these fake reviews that come up as well. So to me,
Exactly.
it's hard to get a grip on what stuff is real and what isn't. Plus, I have to say, like, there's some part of me too that really just doesn't give a shit what other people think of a place. I have to experience it myself. I
Yeah,
don't
I
trust. I
get
don't
that.
trust a whole bunch of like, you know,
Sheep,
who's
essentially.
traveler 2310 to give me any information that I need. I don't know who this person is. I'd be better off.
Mm.
I'd be better off just making up my own mind, frankly.
Sure, I get that. But also, there's like a balance, right? With the amount of like fake news and the amount of, as you mentioned, the bots. Like, you actually need some sort of like affirmation or like confirmation that, dude, you're going in the right direction with this
Yeah.
decision. If 85% of the reviews and the comments are positive,
All
you're
right.
more likely to be, okay, cool. And you know where
I
it especially works? In
you are
choosing a
more.
school for your child. In choosing a
Oh,
school for your child, you better
really?
check out those reviews. They are so real because parents are going to make sure that other parents don't repeat the mistakes or don't have to go down the same, dark tunnel that they did. Yo, dude, I left some lengthy reviews about some of the schools I've encountered and their accounts departments. I know I have single-handedly saved a lot of parents from wasting their time and
All
their
right.
money with some schools because it's just so real. Yo, it's
You
real.
just you get people who like to know what everyone else thinks, and you get people who don't give a shit what everyone else thinks. And I think I
Sure.
fall more into the latter category, you fall more into the former category. That's all. So
Mm.
the people who like reviews will listen to what other people have to say. People who don't like reviews will just make their own mind up completely regardless of what everyone else is saying or doing. And therefore, I'm not so sure I'm helpful to you on this front. But what did you need? What did you need review advice on in particular now? Because
Oh,
you mentioned schools, but
so
it's not that.
no, it's not the school thing. So I'd recently gone on a trip to Sun City. I think, remember when I went to the summers, and
Hmm.
I had roped in one of my best friends to come with me. So we spent like an extra day or two there before the
Oh,
awards.
you
So
you
the
gave a review. You gave a review of the summers that was not very flattering.
Yes, and thank goodness I did because now you guys won't waste your time next year. So
That's
the
true.
lady that hooked us up with the accommodation, we basically made a double payment to her. We made the first payment for the booking, and it wasn't an immediate payment. So she's like, "Well, I can't confirm the booking unless it reflects in my account." So we're like, "Okay, crap, we'll do another payment, but please can you pay us back for the initial one?" She's like, "Of course, I'll get my admin to sort it out." Can I tell you, dude, this person, we're still waiting for that refund. She keeps running away from me. She's not answering my calls anymore. She's blue ticking me. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to a Facebook page and I'm going to write a shitty ass review and I'm just going to let it all out because I'm so upset. I'm the person that roped my friend into this. She's looking at me like, yo, dude, like, are we
Mm.
getting scammed? So I went to their page and there's like no section for comments. So I was just like, this is such bullshit because had I actually checked their page out before and maybe seen some comments and people's experiences, I probably wouldn't have used her services. But because I just kind of, let me try things out for myself and let me figure this out on my own, I ended up, kind of with my dick in my hands. Excuse my French, but that wasn't what I wanted.
All right, so yeah, look, I understand the frustration.
You
There are a
see what I
couple of
mean?
comments. Yeah, I get it, and you've got to get back at these people somehow when they like rip you off or
Somehow.
waste your time or screw you up. Yeah, because your reputation's on the line, right? So
100%. And like these days, there's a big camaraderie, especially online. If you just tell
yeah,
your story in like one or two tweets, like, hey guys, this is what happened. Everybody, let's gang up on these people. These people end up being under so much pressure that some of them end up taking out the money and paying you back because now you are tarnishing their image so much
mm,
that they just like, okay, fine, I'll pay you back my bad. I've seen it happen before. I'm considering it. I just don't know if I've got the energy. Like that's the only thing. I actually don't have the energy. You know what I
she's
mean?
starting a movement. Apparently, Take a Lot gives you 10 Rand discount per review. So
You see? Whoa, I
mhm.
didn't even know that. Ramon, thank you. Sure.
Yeah, and Yonda says, I'm a frequent contributor to ratings as I move around a lot. 95% of the time I rate it, and it's always a pleasant experience. Product reviews are really handy, and those must be shared. See, that's good. Congo Chris says, no, I agree with you. Yelp and influencers are cancer. Whatever happened to shopping in store? Only review shit if something was really good or really bad, says Michael. Yeah,
Mm.
Sunmarie also says, so true, Gareth. Even close friends who give feedback on an experience, I still want to make up my own mind about it. Yeah. Yeah. Look, two different kinds of people. That's all there are.
Mm. Mm. To
Uh,
each
it's
their
become
own.
it's become very clear to me. Like you're either the kind of person who is interested in what majority opinion is, or you think, well, majority opinion is stupid, and you don't care what they think. So there we go. All
It's
right.
also, yeah, but it depends as well, Gareth. Like if it's an experience like going on a holiday or, actually going to a place where you're going to experience something that is completely unique to you, there I'm with you. But if it's like a product that's pretty functional and takes you from A to Z and would most likely work the same for everyone that buys it, I think that we can be more lenient with regards to people's opinions on it, you know?
Okay. All right. Let's do some headlines this morning. We've got a few stories that we need to pay attention to. The first one, unsurprisingly, what is the word of the year in South Africa for 2022? Any guesses?
Corruption.
No, even easier than that. What is the number one word that we have been using? I even said at the beginning of the show this morning, oh no. And what did you have to go and get a key for to unlock
Oh,
the generator? So, what's
generator, ESCOM, power,
load
load
shedding?
shedding. Uh-huh.
Yeah, load shedding is the word of the year in South Africa. This is not something we should be proud of, but the Pan South African Language Board, in collaboration with Focal Point, said on Monday the word came in first, beating palapala, gaslighting, and inganekwane. Okay, so load shedding is the word of the year for 2022. The search for the word of the year is conducted annually in celebration of World Dictionary Day and to reflect the past year. Last year's winner was vaccination.
Ah, of
Um,
course.
Yeah. So there we go. They say Ndombi Hululu said that Pala Pala was a close second and went on to say that it should really come as no surprise to South Africans that load shedding is the most used word of 2022 as the dreaded rolling blackouts instituted by ESCOM have largely defined our lived experience this year. So there's the word of the year. I'm sure you're excited about that. It's terrific, isn't it?
So, so
Here's an interesting story, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I've got some pretty uh, strong opinions on it, and I think it's going to be an unpopular opinion for some people. So I'll save my bit for last. But let me tell you what the problem is here. Following a recent spate of vicious attacks on citizens, especially children, the Sizwe Kupelo Foundation has called for the immediate ban on pit bulls. Most recently, a 10-year-old called Storm Nuku was mauled to death by two pit bulls in Port Elizabeth.
jeez.
Following the incident, the Pit Bull Federation of South Africa said it holds owners and some breeders accountable for mauling incidents. Foundation made a call in a letter dated 30th of September to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, that is Togo Didiza. It also launched an online petition, which has been signed by over 21,000 people, which will be sent to the minister and three others. The foundation teacher and founder Sizwe Kupelo has called on the South African government to follow suit as many other countries have either banned or put restrictions on the ownership of the breed or its importation, such as Russia, Finland, Denmark, the UK, Portugal, as well as parts of Germany, China, and Australia.
Damn.
So, I don't know if you have any strong feelings about
Lock
pit bulls.
lock your shit up. Just lock your dog up and make sure that you can train it. I think to a certain extent, like it's a bit unfair, right? To now be like, well, gotta get rid of the pit bulls. I mean, I get it. It's a very dangerous dog if it is not trained efficiently. Like if you've like skimmed through the training part and you essentially aren't equipped to manage this dog, then things like this happen. I've seen people that own pit bulls and like nothing happens because they know how to manage this dog. Like they keep it in a certain place, blah blah blah. They are mentally equipped to manage this thing. So I'm very like I get it. I'm sorry that there was a child involved that lost their lives, but who is really at fault here? Are we saying,
Yeah.
you know, the pit bull owner should? I don't know. I just think it's that
I
whole thing of everybody's got an opinion and we all want something to fight about now. Just be careful. Just be careful. Just do your thing. If you want to have an actual dog that you need to take care of it and know how to. The problem is people get access to these dogs, but they don't know what they're doing. They just think it's cool to have a pit bull. So, you know, I'm going to look rough and gangster. Dude, no. Doesn't work like that.
why is it? Here's where I'm going to get into trouble now. Why is it that every single time you hear about a child that's been mauled to death or been injured, been horribly bitten, how come it is almost always, I'm talking about like 70% of the time or more, how come it's mostly always pit bulls? So I hear everything that you said now, Lebang, and I can already see the comments coming in from listeners of ours, some of whom may be pit bull owners, saying it's the owners, it's not the dog. Pit bulls can be
Yeah.
really loving and sweet and kind and considerate, and they, you know, these are not vicious dogs. Some of them are bred to fight, but they don't fight with humans. Well, then again, why is it that almost in every situation, and I defy you to find me statistics that prove otherwise, because no one's going to. Why is it that it's always pit bulls? I can guarantee you that every attack, with one or two exceptions in the past 10 years, has been pit bulls. So tell me why. And don't blame children, because children are human and are allowed to they're allowed to wander around in the Republic of South Africa as a human
Sure.
being without the
Sure.
threat of being attacked by some dog. Don't tell me that these owners have to lock them up or any of that stuff either, or that they must train them, because I can't trust people to even look after their own children, let alone their own dogs. So I'm not going to walk down the street worrying that some complete irresponsible asshole has left their gate open and their untrained pit bull might come out and tear off my calf muscle. I don't think this is cool. And
Yeah,
I'm,
but
I'm not. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna say that I want them outright banned, because I don't. I literally don't have a dog in this fight. But
oh,
I'm. I know. But I am not a fan of this breed, because they have the reputation, which is deserved, of being the ones most implicated in attacks on humans, and in particular children. So I'm sorry. If you want a pit bull, all the onus is on you to
yes,
prove that you need to have this dog, why you should have this
sure,
dog.
sure,
And also, if something happens, you go to jail.
sure.
If you
Just
want to
take
own something,
responsibility. Essentially,
if
just
you
take
if
responsibility.
you if you want to keep a leopard on a leash in your garden, there's a reason that leopards can't be kept as pets, and it's illegal to have a lion as a pet in your garden. There's a reason
Yeah.
for that. It's because lions and leopards are wild animals that are going to at some point attack you. We've all heard these stories about, you know, these circus trainers, and they're the best friends with the lion, and the lion recognizes them, and it comes
And then they
running up
still
and it
get
nuzzles
eaten.
them, and they still get eaten. Now, a pit bull is just a gradation of that, and I'm
Oh,
sorry.
just
You
train your
can.
pit bulls. Gareth, I've seen people own pit bulls and like because they are so intentional about training them the correct way, nothing fucks out. Everything goes fine and it's just a smooth transition. Life goes on. Nobody's calf gets mauled. Nobody, it's fine. It's the people that are irresponsible about it. I promise you. It's the people that don't care. They just want pit bulls so that they can be wild. And
Yeah,
as I'm
well,
saying, be.
then
I think
then
there should
then
be like a quota. Like if they
I
need to do a
still don't,
psychological check to see if you
Lebang,
are able.
I still don't like the idea that these dangerous animals are being kept. They're clearly, out of every 10 people who own a pit bull,
Mm.
clearly 9 out of 10 of them are pretty good owners and we don't have incidents. But why is it that 1 out of every 10 pit bulls seems to be responsible for almost all the attacks on innocent bystanders, people
Yeah.
walking past, children, and don't tell me like kids irritate dogs and all that stuff. Of course they do. If you
Kids
have a
even
vicious
irritate
dog,
humans. That's just what kids do, bro.
kids do that. So I'm not going to buy this argument anymore that pit bulls are loving, wonderful creatures. That's not what the numbers say. And you
Mm.
have you have all your work ahead of you if you're a pit bull fanatic to prove that you should be able to keep this vicious animal. And to my mind, I don't see very much evidence that you are going to win this fight because these dogs are the ones who do the damage. Same with
Mm.
guns. Guns don't kill people. Yes, but guns don't walk around looking for fights with people. Guns have to be brandished by a human. So these dogs, if the gates open, we have a problem. Okay? I'm sorry. Can't
Petition to get Gareth to sign the petition,
I'm going
essentially.
to. I would
I
sign
think
this
you
petition.
should just sign it.
I would
Sign
sign this
it.
petition. So I'm in favor of what's going on there. Sorry, pit bull owners. Also, this is gonna really get me into trouble. But a lot of pit bull owners I know are assholes themselves.
Yeah.
Just saying. All right.
T-Ball's
Here's some interesting news, and then we've got to get to JJ Cornish. I'm excited to speak to him today. Apparently, here's a whole lot of e-waste in this country. Now, do you know what e-waste is? It's digital technology that gets thrown away. We all know what I'm talking about because if I say this year, 5.3 billion mobile phones will be thrown away. That's what the International Waste Electronic and Electrical Equipment Forum says. That who knew there was one of those? But
What?
yeah, the International Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Forum. Wow.
Goodness. I kid you not.
If someone is being paid to be on that board,
Dude.
who's paying that? Anyway,
Like, who works there?
who knows? The estimate is based on global trade data, highlights the growing environmental problem of e-waste. Many people keep old phones rather than recycling them. Precious minerals not extracted from waste electronics, such as the copper in the wire or the cobalt in the rechargeable batteries, may have to be mined. People tend not to realize that all of these seemingly insignificant items have a lot of value and together at a global level represent massive volumes. There are an estimated 16 billion mobile phones in the world. And in Europe, almost a third of them are no longer in use. So if you think about it, there are quite a number of these things that just get thrown out with the trash. And, or they get recycled down the economic pyramid to like the poorest people are still on the iPhone 3 or whatever. But eventually,
poorest people
what
on
I mean.
iPhone 3. Poorest and iPhone in the same sentence is not a real thing.
Well, I don't think the iPhone 3 is such a prize, if you ask me. I mean, I don't even think you get a software update for that anymore. It's still operating on like 2008 technology and software technology. Anyway, I mean, just think about it because we all keep these things. We decide one day that we've got. I cleared out an electrical drawer the other day where I had cables and just a whole lot of, you gather so much of this crap. You got this cable that connects to that kind of socket, and you get this thing and that, and this kind of adapter, and I cleared the whole thing out. I had a pile of wires and connectors and stuff that just was not useful to me. And I know that all that equipment that used to connect via that stuff is now redundant. So
Exactly.
just in my house, I probably threw out a kilogram or two of crap. And
But like,
I'm sure there's someone going through it on the rubbish dump nearby, but it was probably not responsible of me to just throw it out with the rest of the rubbish.
Okay, two things. Some of us are hoarders and we were raised by hoarders. So to throw away like a whole cable, like just because there's no more like USB ports being used
Oh,
doesn't mean they
mm,
won't come back. So there's that.
uh,
But secondly, what must we do with it? Like when we like how do we get rid of all of it in a fashion that is in line with the
well,
blah 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 of the world?
here's the motivation that you're looking for. Steve reminds us that there's a lot of gold in electronics, and that has a value. So you know what? If you're smart about these things, and you can take them to recycling places. I mean, Jean says here, recycle, recycle, recycle as much as possible, and that's
Okay.
exactly right. Yeah. All right, we got to leave that alone for now because it is time for us to cross to Jean-Jacques Cornish, who has the latest for us in Africanalysis this morning. Always one of our favorite parts of the show. Good morning, Jean-Jacques Cornish. How are you, sir?
Bonjour, I'm exceedingly well, thanks.
Very good. I think, you've been exceedingly well every time we've spoken to you this year, which is excellent
Mm,
because I don't know too many people who can say that on a weekly basis. Most people complain and moan, as we were discussing
mm.
earlier.
I had a bad day in the mid 50s and nobody paid attention. So I've made sure that I've been well ever since then.
I love it. All right. So, Jean-Jacques, let's start with Ethiopia. I know that these peace talks going on there, and I would like to hear what you have to say about them because, as far as we know, the scheduled meeting at the end of last month was delayed for unexplained logistical reasons, which we're still not entirely sure are valid or reasonable. And now both the Ethiopian government and these Tigrayan rebels that you've told us about before in other episodes say that they are ready to meet up, but we've got no date or venue from the South Africans who have chosen to be the hosts of this because apparently we don't have a dog in the fight, as per our previous discussion. So they want us to arbitrate and to mediate between these two parties. What's really going on, JJ?
Well, it's very difficult to understand. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, says that the situation in Ethiopia is spiraling out of control. Now, the two parties, the government and the rebels, are under pressure from the African Union, from the United Nations, from the United States, and from the European Union to actually get down and talk. All of these bodies have expressed concern about it. And Musa Faki, the head of the AU Commission, has called for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Well, the government says, okay, we will have a ceasefire, but we want to make sure we keep the integrity of the country safe. So we've got to control the airports and we've got to control strategic areas. The rebels have said we will adhere to a ceasefire, we will obey. So it looks like they might well be getting together again. I wish I could get a South African official to say where exactly they're going to meet, because it was Musa Faki said, why don't you go to South Africa? Now, I know that at one point, Abiy Ahmed, the Ethiopian prime minister, was saying South Africa really is partisan in this matter and more concerned for the rebels. He didn't like the neutrality of South Africa, but he seems to have come aboard. So, and it's interesting that we should be called into this because, of course, President Ramaphosa offered to mediate, and when he was chair of the African Union, he wanted to mediate, but nothing really happened. So let's see, and really hope that it will be here in South Africa, giving journalists like me a story to write about that doesn't involve Ukraine or Liz Truss or something that somebody might buy. I don't know. It's a long time since we've had such a thing.
Well, I mean, you mentioned, how little coverage African news does get in the local press and how little interest is paid, sadly and unfortunately, to our immediate neighborhood. That's why, again, I'm so happy we get to do this with you every 2 weeks. And it's brought to you, of course, by the Johannesburg Business School, who deserve all the credit for making it happen. But JJ, when we talk about these things, South Africa obviously has been an arbitrator stroke mediator in many of these conflicts. So famously, Jacob Zuma was involved in the Congo peace talks for some time. But have we proven that we actually have the ability to make a difference? Because some would say that we've squandered so much of our international credibility and capital over the years since, like, Nelson Mandela and Thabo Mbeki, that maybe people don't want us to be the middleman in these discussions. I mean, you could choose a number of countries who perhaps have more success than we do.
Well, there's no doubt that our days as mediator, when we worked on the Congo, and Jacob Zuma did a bang up job on Burundi. I remember people getting very irritated when I explained he was a very good mediator. He was very tough too. You want to go to the loo? Fine, good. Sign this piece of paper and you can go and, point Percy at the porcelain. I once said to him at a dinner he had, or a lunch he had after successful negotiations, how can you do this? When you have a man's arm bent behind his back, how can you put a pen in his hand and ask him to sign the paper? Does that sort of pressure tactic work? And he said, how do you think they worked with us at Codesa? So it was a very interesting experience. But he was good. The fact is, the French couldn't stand the fact that we were getting involved. And when we got involved in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, the president at the time said, we don't have any understanding of the actual African spirit. And Thabo Mbeki went spare at that one. Today it's changed. And I think people have got a sort of fatigue about working on African negotiations. So when somebody like South Africa does step up, they're just too grateful for that. But there's no doubt, Gareth, that we have lost the moral high ground that we had post Mandela. And so a success in Ethiopia would be a very good thing for us.
JJ, let's turn our attention to the Western Sahara, which is also never far from the headlines, even if, again, it doesn't get the attention that maybe other international stories do. Have we made any progress there? Because we also know that, with Morocco, it's very, very difficult to get any kind of solution, even proposed solution, on the table. We know that the Western Sahara remains an area of persistent conflict. There are a number of interests working against each other in that part of the world. Who are the power players at this stage, and is there any progress being made at all?
South Africa took 9 years to keep the promise that Madiba made to recognize the Western Sahara when democracy came to South Africa. But when they did it, they came in spades, and they are the most redoubtable supporters of the Western Sahara. Now, we have Ibrahim Ghali, the president of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, the Western Sahara government, arriving in South Africa today for a state visit. And it's the third visit he's making. Now, when Ibrahim Ghali was in Tunisia just a couple of weeks back, when they had the Japanese Tokyo International Conference on African Development, and it was hosted in Tunisia, the Moroccans got so angry that they received Ibrahim Ghali that they withdrew their ambassador, organized a economic boycott, and, just bullying their smaller neighbor as much as they could. Now, are the Moroccans going to get that angry about South Africa hosting Ibrahim Ghali? I somehow doubt it. But then by the same token, Morocco has taken over from apartheid South Africa as the kind of problem child of Africa, as the bully boy. And they've also inherited apartheid South Africa's unenviable ability to shoot itself in the foot. When there are two decisions to make and one would be entirely wrong, apartheid South Africa would take that one, and Morocco is doing that too. They've actually turned on, it was the French who supported their occupation of Western Sahara, and they've now turned on France, saying, you should be doing more. You should be doing what Donald Trump did, and what the Spanish, who were bullied into accepting Morocco's autonomy in the Western Sahara, you should be doing that. And they've turned on the French to the extent that for 2 years you haven't had high-level meetings between French and Moroccan officials, and the French have actually turned to Algeria, a backer of Western Sahara, who also have a lot of oil and gas and stuff that France needs very badly. The fact is, though, Morocco ran out. If they do withdraw their ambassador from South Africa, last time they did, it took 13 years for him to come back. And they were very, very worried about that. Now, they are, of course, members of the African Union, trying desperately to ease Western Sahara out, having no luck with it at the moment. The fact is, though, they tried when the organization, its predecessor, Organization of African Unity, recognized Western Sahara. Morocco stormed out, and they were out for many, many, many years. They came and they said they wanted to become members of the European Union. Well, the European Union said, what have you got to offer? Dacha, oranges, and prostitutes. No, we don't need that. Thank you very much. And so the Morocco said, okay, in that case, we'll go back to you, Africa. How about that? I think it's a matter of time before the Africa, and all they managed to do so far is give to some African countries phosphates stolen from the Western Sahara. So I think it's just a matter of time before the Africans realize that Morocco has nothing much to offer them, and they'll just become a normal member of the African Union. They won't have the muscle that they'd like to think they have. But meanwhile, interesting to see what comes of the meeting with Ibrahim Ghali, how strong the statement will be from South Africa. You wouldn't want to be the Moroccan ambassador in South Africa, because you get lectured every 2 weeks about being the last colonial power, about giving up the Western Sahara. And South Africa, as I say, is at the forefront of the fight for the autonomy for the Western Sahara. Morocco, they were at war, and in 1991, then when a peace was declared, Morocco promised to have a referendum on the future of Western Sahara, on self-administration, and they've not kept this promise. South Africa keeps saying to them, hey, remember your promise. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and very messy. I just, one morning I'd love us to have an African analysis where we're not dealing with a perpetual and ongoing conflict. I'd love us to talk about, some new hydroelectric scheme that's been put up, or some incredible new breakthrough that's been made in, mining some rare mineral, because God alone knows it's always the same bloody story in Western Sahara, now in Ethiopia, and for a long time in the Congo. I mean, it would be nice if those three areas just keep their house in order. Anyway, I mean, there is one other place that's always fun to check in on, and that is Nigeria. But I'm afraid also bad news on this front, because the flooding there, they've had terrible floods. More than 600 people are dead. 2.5 million people affected by this flooding. JJ, obviously we're going to hear from the Europeans that, well, this is what happens when you aren't serious about climate change. But there are lots of people in Nigeria who their last concern is not burning fossil fuels. Some of them are building their houses in places in the Niger Delta, which is obviously underwater. I know friends of mine who said they've been to Lagos and to various other parts of Nigeria, and they've said people just build their houses wherever there. So obviously, if you're on the floodplain, this is not great news, and we know the population in Nigeria is enormous.
Well, they have the Benue River as well. The Niger and Benue rivers are both their riverbeds have now flooded. And then, of course, from neighboring Cameroon, they've opened a dam, and the waters have been flowing into Nigeria from there. So Cameroon is as popular as a rattlesnake in a lucky dip with Nigeria at the moment. But the fact is, this is being called an overwhelming disaster. And, it's the worst flooding in a decade, 200,000 homes destroyed. So it's very, very, very serious for Africa's most populous country. And, the fact is, yes, of course, a lot of it is to be attributed to global warming. And again, Africa paying the big price for global warming, one of the least liable or the least guilty of causing global warming, Africa's paying this big price. So that's certainly going to come up at the next COP meeting. Why are we paying? And you have promised mitigation. You, the countries that have already been involved in polluting the planet. And this is certainly going to be one of the cases that will be raised.
Well, that's quite a lot for us to swallow this Tuesday morning, but thank you as always. It's good to hear what's going on the continent, and we can only get that information from JJ Cornish, the one and only. It's good to have you back on the show, and thank you very much, JJ. Have an excellent week. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Great pleasure being here. All the
Cheers,
best.
Cheers.
Ciao.
And of course, JJ Cornish and African Analysis is brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School, where we get a chance to look at what is happening around the continent. Always interesting. Lots of perspective that we wouldn't otherwise have, thanks to JJ.
Mm.
And of course, if there are things that you're interested in, let us know. I see a couple of people here talking about how they would like to hear what JJ thinks, G-Star, of the Italian Prime Minister. She's taking Macron on about his deals with Africa. So that's interesting. Let's see what he might say about that. We'll drop it into the emails for him so that he knows what's going on. And also can answer your questions. If you've got questions, let us know.
I'm saying what's interesting is South Africa pointing fingers at other countries and reminding them that they kept their promises and that they need to, do what they said they're going to do. I'm like, South Africa, geez, guys, 3 fingers are pointed right back at y'all. Lead by example. Not you, South Africa. Not you guys reminding other countries that they made promises. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, like, what a cheek. Us telling the rest of the... Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've got a lot more coming to you in the next hour, including Blind History, among other things. We've got a brand new episode of Blind History. We're actually focusing this week and next week on 2 great African leaders. One is Thutmose III, a great pharaoh of Egypt. I got to see one of the obelisks that his reign effectively created that was hewn out of solid rock during his reign a couple of thousand years ago, and which now stands in Istanbul. But what an amazing pharaoh, this guy. I mean, it was, in some ways, it was the high point of ancient Egypt. So we'll take a look at him in Blind History today. And we'll also be looking next week at someone called Mansa Musa, who many people don't even know about, but who was historically probably the richest man who ever lived. And he came from Timbuktu in West Africa, and managed to do during his reign an incredible amount of good, not only for his own people, but for the entire Muslim world at that point. He changed the economy of North and West Africa and was no small player. So 2 African leaders, which I'm sure JJ Cornish would approve of, and which I'm sure will interest you during the course of the next couple of days of Blind History. Stick around for that and a whole lot more. So join Lebang and I in the next half hour and the next hour after that. Well, the next half hour after that for Blind History. And we will chat to you then. Okay, just listen to me. I can't even speak properly.
See you in a bit.
I'm trying to. All right, we'll see you now. Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
I don't know if you read the story, but
one of our studio managers sent me this article. I think it was Reno, about essentially there's an aging fleet problem that's happening locally as well as globally, and essentially because of the rising costs of living, buckled with the fact that cars are now reaching an average age of about 9 years, there's some regulations in South Africa, that we'll talk about it, but there's some regulations in South Africa which could potentially impact people actually maintaining their cars and getting penalized for the fact that their cars are a bit older.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Always an interesting show, the Auto Trader podcast, and especially interesting because they're talking about old cars. And obviously in this country, we've got lots of people who are driving some very old cars, but they'd rather drive an old car they've paid for than a new car that they haven't paid for, right?
What are the taxi owners going to do? I mean, half of the taxis are falling apart. Old is an understatement. So
Yeah.
Wonder how that's going to play out.
For sure. And of course, there was that buyback program a couple of years ago where I think SA Taxi got given a whole pile of money by government so that taxi owners could replace the old and dangerous taxis with new ones. Now you get these quantums.
Yes.
And whether you like it or not, everybody, you paid for that. So just so you know. So I know that this is something that I've spoken about a lot on the show, but apparently you discovered some cool things about your grandfather when you were doing a little family history. Because I've always said, listen, people talk in this country about their ancestors. They talk about, Amadlozi and where they come from and traditions. But people don't go to the trouble of actually finding out about these people. And you can look this information up. There are very good resources in this country. The Human Sciences Research Council in Pretoria. There are libraries. They've got documents with birth and marriage and death certificates on them. So if you really care about that stuff, don't just talk about it. Go and do the research. And I believe you have been doing some research. So tell us about your grandfather.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's not even as deep as going that far. If you still have elders in your family, you can just go sit down with them and just ask them, because they still have the stories, they still have the memories and this information. So it really is our own fault, when we say, oh, I don't know anything, just you're not caring to find out. So we actually were at the tombstone unveiling of my grandfather, and I've always known that he's like this hectic guy who's done some really cool things in his life. I've always known that like he led some really hectic march in Cape Town, but I don't know like to what extent this person was like powerful and amazing and essentially a legend. So I'm sitting there at this unveiling and I'm just like tra-la-la-la-lying, greeting old family members. And I see all these important people rocking up. And I'm like, isn't that like blah, 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 Buthelezi? Isn't that just, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And then like the people that were speaking about his life were like, this person was so great that, I mean, on paper, he led this march of 30,000 people back in 1960 when he was 21 in Cape Town. And they even like renamed a street after him in Cape Town. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. This guy was clearly hectic. And I've always known that. But the way they describe him and his aura and how he was as a leader and a person was really the biggest takeaway. Like, he was apparently the most honest individual. When he walks into a room, like the whole room would just feel his presence. And apparently he was like that from when he was young right up to his last days. And then I was like, okay, cool. This is really nice. I like that I'm related to this guy. But then I started asking myself about like the hereditariness of this greatness. Because, in like the royal family, it's like, if you've got the blood of the queen, then you're automatically dope. I'm like, am I automatically dope because my grandfather was this dope? Could it be?
Just quickly tell me, how old were you when he died?
He died in 2017. So it was just a couple of years ago. So I had the opportunities to, to sit down and get to know him and all that stuff. I just think at the time I took it for granted. And it's a pity. It's unfortunate because now I see the life that he lived. I mean, he was the leader of the PAC for so long and he lived in exile for so long. And he was just so rich with stories about what life really was like. Oh, sorry about that. What life really was like back then. And
that's
now
the ancestors phoning you.
You know what I'm saying? Can you feel the energies? It's just one of those things. But I am curious about whether greatness is passed down via bloodline, yes or no. because
Well, first of all, without you even telling me too much about this, I know your grandfather was Philip Hosanna, right?
yes, that was
Mhm.
him. That was my homie. That's my man's.
Mhm. He led
Like,
a big pass laws march back in 1960, and he was, as you rightly put it, a leader of the PAC.
yeah,
And there's Philip Hosanna Drive in Cape Town, which is named after him, formerly
there
known as
is.
Duval Drive. It's a very
Yes,
important road.
exactly. Dude, I want a road named after me. Like, I want to leave some important legacy like that, where it's like, we remember Lebang Khosana. She got the land back and she gave it back to so many South Africans. Like, I'm so inspired to do something so real because it's like, if he can do it, hey, man,
Well,
what's stopping me, bro? It's in my blood.
it,
It's in my
it is
blood.
that, but this is the point. This is why I love people to just find out where the hell they come from, because
Yeah.
as you said, this guy died in 2017, and you didn't really get into any of these discussions with him, and it would have been amazing to do that. Now, I mean, you're sitting there with your little kid, and I often wish that I had spent more time with my grandparents. You don't think about these things. And when
Exactly.
you in your teens or younger, last thing you want to do is sit around old people and talk to them. But it's the most important thing you can do while they're still alive and they're still lucid. It's like
It
get
truly
all
is.
that wisdom and
It
talk to them
truly
about
is.
the amazing things that they've done. I can't say enough. If I could go back in time, I would record interviews with my grandparents. Just on my, in those days, I don't know if I had a cell phone, but I'll make a plan. I mean, there's always a way to record things, right? They've been doing this for years. And then you have it
Mm,
on record for your children and your grandchildren. And it's a really powerful thing to know
it
where you
is.
come from. It gives
It
you
is.
the confidence to go forward,
Yeah.
knowing that there's some substance behind.
Exactly. It's literally just like that confirmation that you need, that if there's something that's been burning inside of you, a little bit of like,
Mm.
like uneasiness, or you don't know what this greatness is, I promise you, if you see somebody in your family having done these large scale things, that's all you
Yeah.
need to confirm that you can do it too, or you can even do more. So I'm feeling incredibly inspired after this weekend. Like, I just feel like a reborn version of myself, where I'm like, damn, like, I'm so proud of the fact that that was my grandfather. And really, I wish that when he was here, I had given him more attention and just sat down and picked his brain about so many things. But at least I have the blood. The blood will guide me,
Yeah.
like in the movies. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Well, even if it's not hereditary, and there are some comments here about how like underwhelming so many royal families are, and that's probably true. But even if it isn't, it's a source of great pride, and I do think
Sure.
it's really important to know this stuff. Jean says, "I've always wondered how and where I could get info about the previous generations of my family and where they come from." Well, you start off with the ones who are alive now, and you ask them to just write down the basic details, where someone was born, what their full names were, because there are people who are running around talking about, you know, what they where they fit into the world and who they are and what they consider
Yeah.
part of their identity, but they don't even know who their grandparents were. And it's important to know this stuff. Know where you come from. It really does help you to figure out who you
Mm.
are.
Definitely, definitely.
Start there.
Especially if you're unsure. And so many of us are unsure. And we're so westernized and we're so exposed to things that really have nothing to do with who we really are. I think step one is just starting with your living ancestors. Start with your parents, your grand uncles, if you still have your grandparents, the ones around your immediate ancestors will be able to shed some sort of light. I'm even
Mhm.
embarrassed to say, but this past weekend was the first time that I heard my family's istagazelo. It was the first
Yeah.
time. And I sat there and I'm like, I'm 32. This is the first time I'm hearing this. I'm embarrassed. But now I've made it a mission to go find it, get a copy of it, learn it, and share it with my kids so that they can also, know it growing up. It was a
Yeah.
remarkable, I guess, little epiphany for me. I was like, ding, light bulb, go be great.
Well, there's lots of interesting stuff to unpack about that, and if you find out more about your own ancestors, then it gives you color, and you feel like also you belong in this country when you see what your immediate ancestors and forebears might have done to build this place and to make it a better place and to do things here that mattered. Then you suddenly feel, okay, well, I've got a real right to be invested in the future of South Africa. And I think that's probably where a lot of people get uncoupled from the whole thing. Just quickly, a correction. Apparently, the Mansa Musa episode was on last week. And K&A just saying it was top notch. Thank you very much. Yeah, Mansa Musa was last week. Tutmosis III this week, and more episodes of Blind History coming up in the next few weeks. We've got a lot of really cool people that we're going to cover in this season, and I hope you get to enjoy all of them with us. Congo Chris says, who's the mini-me, Lebang?
Oh, dude. So my 3-year-old just wakes up. I'm like, okay, cool. I can manage her. I just give her my cell phone. I literally like slide it to her and I'm like, go play games. She can disappear. Now my 1-year-old just woke up. I'm like, oh crap. She's she's like the real like firecracker in the family. So I'm just like hoping that they don't wake up their little sister.
Oh my God.
Yeah, look, it's always a good time. Yeah, it's always a good time. Actually, let me go check up on them. I'll be right back.
All right. Okay. Jared says, I just recently found out that my wife's great-grandfather was the architect of the Moederkerk in Stellenbosch and the church at Graafrenet. We recently went to go and see them. I was in awe. That's amazing. That's lovely, lovely stuff to know. And again, it's like this is the real inheritance. You know, it's not how much money you leave your children. It's the events that they can be proud of by reflecting back on the people that they come from. And yes, even if greatness is not hereditary, certainly there is a lot of stuff that is hereditary. And it's nice to inherit those genes because there is some part of you that may also have a creative streak, that may also have similar physical characteristics. You know, I look at a picture that I found the other day of my great-grandfather. It was a photograph taken in probably the late 1800s. And I compared it with my brother, and they look like the same person. It's absolutely frightening. These two people could not look more alike. And they're separated by, almost 100 years. So obviously some very, very strong genes carried across there. And it's when you see these things, it just does remind you of what's really important. Family, kind of who you marry and the kind of kids you produce and the kind of difference they hopefully will make to the world. And you want to be a part of that. You want to be a part of that story. All right. Jared also says the fact that history is tangible and can be seen by generations to come. That's also very, very cool. I agree completely. So, Lebang, what did I miss last week? Because I asked them this yesterday on the show, and they had no answer for me. We even put it on Instagram because it was so ridiculous. I know they spoke about load shedding and water shedding and all that crap, but did I miss any really interesting news stories? Is there anything that you were busy with last week that I need to know about? Because I feel like I've been out of it for a little while.
Look, to be honest with you, it really was just another week in South Africa. If anything, the water crisis was amplified and it became a real thing. Like we literally are just still recovering from load shedding. Barely. We're on like our last leg. And then they're like, okay, cool, guys, open your tap at your own risk. Like literally at your own risk. And that's kind of the life that we're living now. But it was chill, dude. It really just like, it was just one of those. I was actually coming back from a 15-hour drive from Cape Town. So I was quite bummed that you weren't around. Because I wanted to share that with you, especially like, dude, I did the big drive. And it took me like 5 days to recover. It really took me a long time to get...
You didn't do it all in one go because you would have been exhausted.
I was tired. I did it all in one go, dude. Like I drove the first 12 because I trust my driving, and then I let one of my friends do the other 3. But I was still like I was a zombie. Like, and as soon as I landed in Cape Town, I was now in work mode. So it was hectic. I'm probably never gonna do that again. I'll definitely do like the garden route though, maybe with like my kids, make it a thing. But I just wanted to see it like for my own 2 eyes, like driving past the Karoo. I'm like, oh, Bakabantu's from here. Oh, da, 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 da. Like I felt like a tourist. I really did. I was like, holy crap! There's places in this country that I've actually never been to, and I don't know anything about. But you didn't miss a lot. Man.
You're insane. That's such a long drive. I mean, people usually split it up. They stop somewhere like Colesberg or Graafrenet or Bloemfontein just so they can take a break for one night. You drive for 12 hours in a row. That's exhausting.
Bro, I was tired. Like if it weren't for like the window and the aircon, I don't know how I would have survived that. But it was also like a time crunch. Like I wanted to get there on Friday at a specific time because I knew if I got there any later, then I'd be in like ridiculous traffic. And the wilder thing is that I actually forfeited my flight for this. I literally booked a flight when it was still affordable, like 2 months ago,
Yeah.
because I knew I was going down on this weekend. But then I was like, I'm going with my friends and my crew, da 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 da. We'll just drive down. And look, it's never happening again. Nah. No.
Jesus,
I do not
sounds
advise it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Sounds very
It was something else. It was something else.
I-
What was nice was like I could really make a lot of the cross references with stuff we've spoken about on the show and some those kinds of things. So I was like,
Listen,
okay, cool. This is nice.
I'm embarrassed to admit I've never driven all the way to Cape Town. I've never driven all the way
Don't.
back either. No, it's it's a long trip. I mean, I know people who've done it, but they split it over 2 days, 3 days.
Mm,
The furthest I've gone is into the southern Free State from here, and then from Cape
okay.
Town into Worcester and what are those other places called? I can never remember. There's one with an M. I'm not going to try and get into Paarl,
Mm.
there, but that's not even far out of Cape Town. That's like an hour's drive. But I've never done the
Yeah.
connection. So I've never been into the Karoo, actually, the Karoo proper,
Oh,
which is kind of embarrassing
well,
considering, we often talk about how I always say, oh, there's so much of this country that's unexplored. We all need to pay more attention. And, if you only got out there with your car, it's not hard to do. We should all just travel around South Africa because it's amazing. And then I don't do it myself. So I feel like a bit of a
yeah.
hypocrite.
Don't worry about it. Just give it a try. Like give it a try and decide like which parts you want to see because I promise you, like the people are just different. Like we're used to Joburgers and Cape Townians and Durbanites and wherever else we travel, but there's these little dorpies in between that are like
Mm.
the link. And you're like, oh, these people are just moving different. Their energy is different,
And
and it's just intriguing, really.
they
Everyone's
have
old out there.
they have a whole different life, and it's just it's a totally removed world from the craziness of Joburg or Cape Town.
Yep.
So a couple of things. Okay, I think it was Montague or Malmesbury or McGregor or Mossel Bay. It doesn't matter, but I'm not going to commit to which one it is. I don't know, but
Any of the four.
my brother and my sister-in-law took their 2 kids on a little Cape holiday not so long ago. And they went to Greyton, which I see someone's mentioned here before. Apparently the most charming little town in South Africa. Just absolutely beautiful. Totally removed from everywhere else. Lovely, lovely people. Very, very much like a little village. And
Okay.
some people really want to live far away from the city. And apparently this place is just delightful. So we still have those in South Africa, little towns that have not completely fallen apart, and it's good to know that they're around. I mean, everybody was raving about it when they got back, so that's a place I want to go to as well. Oh, Congo Chris says,
No, I
Gareth,
think
if you
it's interesting.
if you really want to go off the beaten track, go to Sutherland. You can go and visit the Salt Telescope. I've wanted to do that for years, and I've just never got to it because Sutherland is so completely out of everywhere else. It's so far, it's so out of range of every other place that I've been to. So yes, I mean that's on the agenda. Don't worry, I'll put it on my list. There's lots of places I still have to go to.
On your
Oh
bucket
my
list.
God, Lebang, I'm feeling so much pressure about December, and I don't want to spend money. I know it sounds like I really don't. I don't want to go somewhere where I have to pay for expensive accommodation, or God alone knows fuel is already expensive. So if you drive or you fly, it's going to cost you. But I'm feeling pressure to make a decision about a December holiday because a lot of people are already doing that, and I don't know if I should even pay attention to this pressure or whether I should just get on with my life and see what happens. I'm not one of those people who can just roll into the month of December and we'll go whichever way the wind blows. I've actually got a few things I got to do, so I've got to start planning and thinking about it.
Well, look, on the upside, you literally just came back from like a whole trip, which I don't think a lot of people, have. So you still are living in low key like that vibe. Give yourself time and talk pressure. When have you ever buckled under any pressure, Gareth. Come on. It's just
That's true,
humans.
but
It's just people giving you their opinions. I mean,
yes,
do you stay in your lane, do what you need to do, listen to your
yes,
pocket, listen to your
yeah.
vibrations, you listen to your energy. I mean, look, if people want to do their thing in December, I think good for them, let them do it. A lot of us aren't going anywhere. A lot
Well,
of us are just like, gonna
okay,
find
so
peace in our home.
the only reason I'm saying there's pressure is because what I would like to do in December,
Mm.
frankly, is to just be at home. I love Gauteng in December. It's quiet.
Oh,
Everybody's super relaxed. The weather is amazing.
mm,
Um,
mm,
whoever else is around, you can see them during the day or night because it's holidays.
mm,
There are a lot of reasons to stay at home in December, and that obviously is also a great way to save money. But
yeah.
I'm not feeling pressure to make a decision to go somewhere on holiday. It's like, do I decide to stay at home or do I go on holiday? And that's where the
Okay.
pressure comes in. So I'm very happy to stay at home.
Well,
Just saying.
it's sounding to me like you've already made up your mind and you're gonna stay at home.
You know me well.
Like it sounds like you're pretty relaxed and you like the idea of staying at home in
You know me
in
well.
December. And dude,
Can
how
you?
nice is it going stepping outside and just
Mm.
breathing air that isn't contaminated with millions and millions of people? It's just like a different country in December. Joburg just changes into a place that I like. Like,
Well,
can you
I
guys
also
stay there?
I can't think of anything worse than being on a crowded beach or in a
Oof.
you know in a busy seaside holiday town right now. It's just that is very off-putting to me. And
Mm-mm.
I know there are
Mm-mm.
some places that are amazing and people rave about Cape Town in December, but I've done Cape Town in December a couple of times. It's too hectic and there are too many Joburg people there.
Way too many. It's almost like there's an unwritten like rule. Okay, if you're from Joburg in December, just pack your bags
You
and
must go,
off to
yeah.
Cape Town you go.
You
It
have
just
to.
gets you have to be in Cape Town. And
Mhm.
I'm also with you there. I'm over it. I've also done it a few times. I don't see what the hype is. It's just expensive. It's costly. I want to go into January
Well,
knowing that I have nothing to worry about.
yeah, that's another thing. There's Christmas and all of that expense, but we'll
Oh,
talk about that another
yeah.
time. It's all we're doing is sitting here complaining about money. But I think that's what a lot of people are thinking about right now. It's
Mm,
really it hasn't been an easy year for anybody. In fact, the last 3 years you could argue have not been easy for anybody, and everything is expensive. Flights are expensive, accommodations expensive.
mm,
If you're going to be buying Christmas gifts, food is expensive. We've got to think about these things, and I don't want to put anyone in a foul mood first thing on a Tuesday morning. But if we don't think about this, then we end up in
mm.
January with tons of regret.
And debt. I mean, all we can do is really offer solutions. And solution number one is just to save and plan, and so that you don't end up in the circle of like, oh, why are things so expensive? Oh. Focus on solutions and how you can stay, I guess, above water. Speaking of which, Life with Lebang is back. I
Ah,
recorded season 2 of Life with Lebang. I'm so excited. I did episode 1 last week. It was kick ass. I'm in studio tomorrow morning, and we're actually talking about buying a house in this economy because that's exactly what I did. And I guess my timing was off, but we're going to be chatting to somebody who can shed some light on the best ways to still get the house that you want, but within your budget and economically efficiently. So that's at 9 o'clock tomorrow from 9 to 10, of course, on cliffcentral.com. I'm quite keen. So if you are in the business of a first time buyer, or maybe not even just first time, but if you're thinking of buying a house now at this state, you better listen to the show.
that's an interesting discussion. I was talking to my friend about property the other day. I said to him, "It's
Mm,
obviously not a seller's market at the moment." And he said to me, "Oh, yes, it is." He said there are
yeah,
lots of people selling and getting exactly the price they want right now. So you just have to have the right, I suppose, estate agent, and you have to have the right
sure,
local knowledge to make it happen.
sure.
But I don't know enough to be able to comment on this in any serious way. But you have, and you've done a show on it. So there we go. If you're thinking of buying a house, this is an interesting discussion. So don't miss Life with Lebang. Just quickly, one other thing that someone brought up here. Durban, they're saying, they hate it when people from Gauteng come down to Durban and throw themselves in the sea. But are the beaches even okay to swim in? in Durban at the moment, because remember they had with the floods and everything, there were chemical spills, and then there was E. coli in the water, and God alone knows. So I'm just asking. I'm not looking for a fight here. I don't want people from KZN to suddenly give me shit about this. Is it safe to swim in the sea on the north coast of KZN at the moment? Just asking. Anybody
Just
know the
asking.
answer? Yeah. If
Marco
you do know,
says no.
Marco says no. Okay, but then
Mm.
yeah. Okay. Well, we need more than just Marco's
Is
no.
that going to stop anyone? Like, Gareth, you know what happens in Durban, like in December? People just lose their minds. Like, that's not going to stop anyone from getting into that water. Like, are you going to tell a bunch of little kids who have never seen the beach before that do not enter? Oh, they're going to go in there, underpan and all. They do not
but
hold
then,
back.
But it's not worth it if they come out with dysentery and diarrhea, that's not so lekker. So, okay, Corona's Boring says there's a little sewage, to be honest. Oh, God. Oh, God. Okay, it's not
No
safe.
swimming.
Marco, Steve, Sweet Pea, they all say no. Now, if that's the case for December, is that going to affect travel down there? Because what's the point of going to the sea if you can't get in the sea? Let's not pretend Durban is this great place to go to if you can't go down to the beach. Can we? Sweet Pea says raw sewage, I think, pouring in is what she's trying to say there, or he's trying to say there. Friends have told me who live there, says Marco, it's not safe to swim. They are saying that to keep us away from their sea. See, David is a conspiracy theorist. He reckons that the people in KZN are trying to get the rest of us to not come so that they can actually enjoy their own coastline for a little while. I know the answer, says Carl. If you swim in any KZN sea, you'll get tuberculosis. It's AIDS with tuberculosis. It's AIDS with TB. Oh, Jesus, that sounds horrendous. Sorry, raw sewage pouring in, featured on Carte Blanche. Oh, no. If it's on Carte Blanche, it's got to be true,
Then
right?
then it's credible. It's done. We cannot get in the sea. Sorry, is what they're saying.
Sean says they just did a half Ironman in Durbs. So where did they swim? If they did swim, good question. Yeah, my worst fear is to get into the sea or a pool and a human turd floats by me. That's the absolute worst thing. Yeah,
the worst, Gareth.
I think the worst. That's the worst. Yeah. Can you think of something worse right now?
Oh man, like if I see like some freaking fish that is not like hasn't been discovered, they're always discovering these new freaking fish every week that have like 4 eyes and like 6 fins. Like if I'm chilling with my kid, living my best life at the beach, putting my toes into the water, and then this thing that's unrecognizable that I've never laid eyes on. I've been to all the aquariums. It's not even discovered. That would scare me more than a freaking turd just swimming past. If anything, at least I recognize the turd. Like, oh hey, how you doing? I dropped one of your cousins just 2 nights ago. At least I know what it is.
Oh my God. Oh. I would not be happy with either, frankly, but I think the turd is worse. Apparently, everyone who did the Ironman got horrendously sick. You see, we find information out. This is why I ask questions on this show. I don't have all the answers. Our listeners do. The KNA says, you'd think our bloody government would start a public campaign aimed at public health on our beaches. It's sad. Yeah, because if people get sick from the water, then you saw what they were meant to do during COVID. They told us all to wear masks and sanitize and social distance, and we weren't allowed to leave our houses. You remember. So if they care about our health so much, why aren't they doing something about this?
They don't care about our health so much, essentially, is the point. We're just being gaslit.
Exactly. Lighthouse Barber, who's obviously from the Western Cape, says, who swims in the sea? I do. It's one of the reasons I like going to the sea. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vincent says, watch out for floaters in Durban. Oh, God, that's horrible.
Oh, and you see what you've done, Gareth.
KNA has an interest now in your toilet habits because they think 2 nights ago, Lebang, you need to increase that fiber, girl.
Well, geez, thanks, KNA, for that information. I'll do exactly that. Putting me on the spot there. But no, it wasn't 2 nights ago. I'm not going to tell you when it was, but it wasn't 2 nights ago, essentially. And people generally swim in the sea. That's what we do when we go to the sea. We go there to swim. Some people go to swim. Some people go there to, release some things.
Oh, God. Yeah, look, I don't want to think about that too much because really, I mean, obviously everything empties into the sea, but isn't it
Yeah.
meant to have a way to clean itself? And I know humans are doing no favors to the environment anywhere in the world, and we are disgusting, and we screw up almost everything we touch. But doesn't the sea have a mechanism for cleaning all that stuff? Don't the fish eat all the filth? Isn't that how it works?
They should. I think there's like definitely like a whole ecosystem vibe where stuff goes this way, this fish do that with that, blah 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 blah. There's a thing. But like humans, Gareth, you know us. Like
Mm,
any little opportunity to fuck something up. And we
mhm.
somehow will, sadly,
Yeah, we will.
you
No,
know?
you're right. Okay, well, that's all we got time for now. I'm going to start. Oh, hang on. Let me just see if I can do this quickly. I've got an episode of Blind History for us to look at for this morning, and I'm excited to bring you this episode. I just got to see why it's not coming up immediately for me here because I'm trying to add it and it's not working. In fact, it kicked me out just now when I tried to do it. Simpiwe, if you can play the episode from your side, that'll be really helpful because I don't know why, but I'm not able to add any files this morning. It's just
Yeah, it's because
these
you
teething.
guys aren't recycling your technology. See what happens when you don't
That's
recycle
probably what it
technology,
is.
Gareth?
Mhm.
It all
Yeah.
backfires.
Well, I'm going to try and get Simpiwe to help us out with this because I don't know why, but I'm not able to load Blind History for this morning. All right, this brand new episode of Blind History is with me and Anthony Medera. We're very pleased to bring you an episode on Tutmosis III, the great pharaoh of probably the apex period of ancient Egyptian history. And if you know anything about Egyptian history, and I don't expect you to know everything about Egyptian history, it's a long period of time. I mean, this guy, there are still statues, obelisks, temples that were erected during the time of his reign. And he really was an extraordinary man. So many of these people lost into the sands of time, and in Egypt in particular, sand is is what time turns everything into. But here he is, Tutmosis III, and a brand new episode of Blind History. We will see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Don't miss the show.
Ciao.
Take it away, Simpiwe. Unlike most great people from history, you can actually still look into the faces of some of the pharaohs. At the Egyptian Museum of Civilization, 22 mummies occupy a sanctified space and represent over 3,000 years of recorded history. One of the most memorable is Tutmosis III. While he was alive, his eyes looked out over the apex of ancient Egyptian culture and power. Under his rule, they built the greatest temples, expanded their territory, and established a pantheon of gods. They also mummified hardy-dars. Welcome to another episode of Blind History, and for the second episode in a row, we're focused on Africa, although we're going back some distance here. Anthony Medera and I, here to look after you, take care of you, tell you all about these people, and hopefully inform you about what happened, in this case, thousands of years ago. Ant, someone said to me once that the distance from us back to Cleopatra is not as big as the distance from Cleopatra back to the pyramids.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I mean, that's hard for you to figure, right? And if you think about the fact that Cleopatra lived so long after this guy that we're going to discuss now, that we are closer to her time than she was even to his time, tells you something about the span of ancient Egyptian history. So Tutmosis III, also known as Tutmosis the Great, was the sixth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, officially. And he ruled after someone who's also famous, who we've referred to a couple of times in Blind History, and who's regarded as one of the first great female rulers. That's Hatshepsut, who was actually his stepmother and his aunt. So Tutmosis comes into history around about that time. If you're looking for dates, somewhere around 1479 BC. I mean, that's an age ago.
And I really enjoyed investigating Tutmosis III. Very impressive. What I've always loved about, the greats that we've looked into in blind history, we look at Alexander, and I've said it a few times, and I'll JC and and even Napoleon for that matter, and we'll get to that now because it's mentioned in his life. But just the speed and the way that he conquered territories, innovative, just very, very different to what they were used to, which brought massive success for him.
Isn't it cool to be dealing with someone who here is a conqueror? He's someone who was able to, he was at the head of Hatshepsut's armies for a time. And during the final 2 years of his reign, he had a co-regent. But the rest of the time, this guy stood tall. He was a warrior. He was a king. He was a conqueror. He was an architect, a big thinker. These are the kinds of people who history writes down as the great. They don't just throw the great around. They really only attach that label to the very best people. And in ancient Egypt, there probably only a few of these great pharaohs, and he's definitely one of them.
Yeah, and he took Egypt to the zenith, of its empire at the time. All the way to the top of the Mediterranean. And if you look at the distance, they had chariots, yes, but they're horses and chariots, but the distances he traveled to conquer, it's insane, to try to put that into perspective.
No, I know. And he had such a vast territory. It was everything from Syria to modern Ethiopia and a whole lot of land in between. So this guy was not sleeping on his laurels. He was definitely working hard. And, a nice long reign too, because if you have a longer reign, you have more time to do things. In his case, he also had a great apprenticeship under Hatshepsut and Thutmoses II. But to me, I suppose the most interesting part of his story is also that we have good records on him. There are lots of surviving monuments. He came after a great pharaoh. I think he did some slightly scurrilous things to kind of erase part of Hatshepsut's legacy. And maybe that had to do with the fact that she was a woman and, that you could claim that, for example, she'd broken tradition by being a female pharaoh and that he wasn't comfortable with that. But all in all, I think this guy really did exactly what you'd expect a pharaoh to do. Took control, implemented his ideas, conquered vast territories, brought Egypt to the top of its game. And really, you can criticize anybody in history, and rightly we should. But he seems to have done a pretty good job of keeping an extremely difficult empire together.
Yeah. And how do we know this? Well, because he told us. So
Exactly.
they didn't mind boasting a little bit about how great they were. Ramesses was similar, later on, but Thutmoses also gave it a good shot. But Hatshepsut, I think that's also a very, very important part. And you mentioned what he did, and he did it later on. So it wasn't vindictive. If he'd done it straight after her death, it could have been that. But it was much, much later in his life. And when his son, was getting to an age, and he was getting to an age that to the end of his life, I think he was concerned that the lineage would be protected on the male side. And so when he did take information and what she'd put up, and he took that away, it was more, and he put it towards his ancestor, being his dad and his grandfather. I think it was to protect the male line. I don't think there was anything nasty involved or sinister, etc.
Well, I hope not. Do you know about these people called the Hyksos?
Yes.
Okay, so the Hyksos were his major enemy for much of his reign, and they were able to conquer quite a lot of land because they had quite interesting military and agricultural technology, and they brought advanced weaponry in. He drove them out, and the Egyptians, obviously having found what they left behind, started to use these weapons too. So Thutmoses III was clever about kind of pushing out and driving out his enemies, but if they had something that he didn't, he very much took that in and assimilated that into the Egyptian culture. And the Hyksos are quite a poorly understood civilization. We don't know a lot about them. They're actually doing some excavations in northern Egypt at the moment, where they're discovering more about these very strange people that used to live there. But they were sort of like the Egyptians in some ways, but very, very different in others.
with the Hyksos actually came out of northern Syria. Was near Carchemish, or was that the Mitannis?
No, I think
or
you're
are they
right.
the same?
No, they are the same.
Okay, all right, got it. So then the Mitannis,
In fact,
100%. And
Didn't he took a wife or two from the Hyksos tribes?
yes, 100%. I think, they talk a lot about his first campaign against Megiddo, which is his famous battles, but his 8th campaign, where he went all the way north to where his grandfather had gone, but even further than his grandfather, to take on the Mitanni or the Hyksos, as you'd mentioned. And then he brought 3 of the harem back with him. That was probably his greatest campaign, not for the action that they saw and the amount of people they killed, because the Mitanni king ran away, but for the innovation he brought. Gareth, if I could just, on this particular campaign, what he did in the campaigns prior to that and between Megiddo and this 8th campaign, when he conquered certain areas, he set up depots. And this really shows you, how sharp he is. When we talk about logistics, he thought very much about logistics. And so he set up these camps, these depots where he would put grain and everything to feed his vast armies. And on the 8th campaign, he had a plan in place, and he stayed away from those towns in the Near East that gave him quite a rev, and he didn't want to engage with them. He went around them because he had a clear strategy, but nobody knew about this except himself. He stopped at Byblos, which he had good control over, and then he asked the Byblos, the powers that be, to give him cedar from the trees they had there. And then he took these big boards with him, and nobody realized what they were for, and off he went. But effectively, he got to the Euphrates River, which at the time was massive. I don't know what we can liken it today, but it was very, very difficult and rough to cross at times. And then he built boats. And this took the Mitannis by massive surprise, and they just ran away. So there wasn't even a battle. But that's why they often talked about him being the Napoleon, of ancient Egypt. So all of his things were very strategic in the way he planned it. So all of I think his goal effectively was to get Mitanni in the end.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, he seems like, you obviously point out, that they weren't expecting an invasion, and they had no army to get ready against him. And he went freely from city to city and pillaged them, while the nobles were hiding in caves and trying to get away as quickly as they could from him. He put up these steels commemorating his crossing of the Euphrates, which you've just mentioned, next to the stele of his grandfather, which had been put up some decades earlier. And he returned to Syria by way of Ni, where he recorded that he had engaged in an elephant hunt, among other things. And he collected tribute from foreign powers and returned to Egypt in victory. They used to have those amazing victory celebrations where he would come into the city in triumph, something which the Romans later copied, on chariot with all the soldiers arrayed in front of him. I mean, he really must have been the conquering hero every step of the way.
Yeah, on that trip back where he went elephant hunting, he had stated in one of the obelisks that he killed all 120 elephants by himself in a phenomenally short amount of time. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's possible, but I think he was a great hunter. He used to kill lions and elephants.
Well, so there's also a way to show that you were a real man in those days, and if you were a king, you had to kill many more animals than everyone else.
But Gareth, what was interesting, the first campaign, because when Hatshepsut passed away, so that was his stepmom / aunt, half aunt, whatever it was. So effectively, Tutmos I, which was his grandfather, he had a daughter, as well as the son who became Tutmos II. But the daughter, that was Hatshepsut, and she was married, as was the custom. She was married to Tutmos II as being his wife and half sister. But effectively, he didn't reign very long, Tutmos II. So he only had one son. Tutmos III was extremely young, I think 2 or 3 years old when his dad died. So then Hatshepsut, and we mentioned it before, took over as regent, but she said, stuff this, I'm going to be king. And instead of saying I'm going to be female king, she just said I'm going to be a king like anybody else. So so it could be male or female.
And she's portrayed on all the historical records we can find. She's got a fake beard on and everything. but she's basically
100%.
doesn't want to be called queen. She wants to be pharaoh, and
Yes,
she's
100%.
treated as such by everybody. She's referred to in the male and the female form.
But then when she died, and when he took over, obviously everybody thought this is an opportunity, all their enemies. This is an opportunity now to gain some ground back on Egypt. So he needed to do something. And so this, in effect, was his first campaign. And he went north. And why I found this very interesting is Megiddo is famous in the Bible. Another name was called Armageddon.
Yes, that's right.
And I think this Armageddon name is, we all hear about it. It's the last, when you have the last battle will be the end of the world. And it states in the Bible. And he had a battle there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but later in the Egyptian, I think around 600s, there was another great battle there. And in the First World War, there was a battle there as well. So it's a very interesting place.
It
Maybe
seems
not
to
so
be
great looking.
No, it's a place that seems to attract a lot of military attention. And as you say, in the book of Revelations, they say that ultimately the final battle of the world will take place at Megiddo or Armageddon. That's where the word comes from. But this guy, this Thutmose III, he didn't just move north. He also had a campaign that went south into Nubia, modern Ethiopia. He went all the way up to the fourth cataract of the Nile. Although no king of Egypt had ever gone so far with an army, previous campaigns had spread Egyptian culture that far already. So they already had some idea of what was going up further north. And then, of course, he constructed a couple of really, really interesting monuments. And I always think that these are a great way to measure a civilization and to measure a ruler's ability to kind of change the world, because he built that incredible temple at Karnak. I mean, this is probably one of the most beautiful surviving Egyptian buildings of all time. The hypostyle hall with those famous columns. Of course, there was a temple there before, which his grandfather had built, but he made it spectacular. And he built all these side chapels. He built the new entranceway. He built this causeway that led to it, and made Karnak the center, the focus of Egyptian religious and cultural behavior.
Yeah, I think with all the prosperity he got from his campaigns, Egypt was in a really, really strong position. And he even had Hatshepsut before him. She built and spent wisely. I think it was a time of growth and also of peace, with closer to home in Thebes and Karnak, all those areas that you're speaking about. And it was a really great time for ancient Egypt. But Gareth, the thing that's always something that's interested me is, how do you control such vast territories? So Alexander the Great had satraps. There's various great leaders that, it's very difficult to control something that is 2,000 miles away or 3,500 kilometers away. So, but what he did was, interestingly enough, he would, inverted commas, kidnap the princes from these areas that he conquered, and then he would take them back to his royal court. And their life often was better at the royal court than it might have been, in their home territory. And or sort of indoctrinate them, bring them up in the Egyptian way, and that it would keep the conquered lands honest. They didn't necessarily want to upset him, because then, maybe the son would be killed. And it did actually happen that, a son would get on very well and be happy at court, but the next day would be killed because his grandfather, his dad would be stealing oranges or something. I don't know, but.
Well, there are plenty of reasons for people to argue and fight in those days. They'd find them if there weren't any readily 100%. Available.
But I've quite an effective, efficient way of sort of ruling the furthest territories.
Absolutely. Now, we've spoken a little bit about Hatshepsut, but we've got to talk a little bit about his death as well, because they found his mummy. And what's amazing is here we've got these kings who lived thousands of years ago, and we can actually go and see their faces in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. I mean, there's a mummified head of Thutmose III, which is still in the museum, and it's in good condition. You have some idea of what he looked like. He had this.
It was not pretty. I must be honest.
No, not pretty, but I mean, he not bad teeth, I've got to say.
He had an overbite.
Yeah, but considering like dental technology at the time, the guy didn't die with so many teeth missing, and of course he was buried in splendor, as was everyone at this time. It's a typical sort of 18th dynasty tomb. But obviously, not a lot left in the chamber. Famously, Tutankhamun, the whole reason that we know Tutankhamun's name so well is not because he was a particularly interesting pharaoh, but just because Carter found all of the stuff in the tomb. So we can only imagine the kinds of riches that may have been left inside the tomb of Tutmosis III by the time he died. But there's a big quartzite sarcophagus, which is red, and that's in the middle of the burial chamber. It's in the shape of a cartouche, which is exactly the shape of the kind of hieroglyph that would have been used to designate a name to a pharaoh. So all of this is very beautiful. You can only imagine how much art and splendor there must have been in the tomb at the time that it was built. But he handed over
his mummy, Gareth, wasn't there. The priest kings of the 21st dynasty took them away from the thieves, so to speak. And it was, you mentioned 1880 odd. He didn't have any feet. So when they moved his body, they knocked his feet off when they may be moving his body. So so it was a bit shorter. He was short, but he was even extra short.
After that, well, what they used to do, and you hinted at it now, is they would take the bodies out of all these tombs, and then they'd hide them in a cache. And funnily enough, they hid most of these in a place called Der Il-Bari, which was right above Hatshepsut's mortuary temple. And it was one of the few places they could keep these bodies safe from all these tomb robbers. So thanks to the people of that 19th, 21st dynasty, who managed to hide away the bodies. Ahmoses I, Amenhotep, Tutmosis I, second, Ramesses I, Seti, Ramesses II, and of course Tutmosis III. We wouldn't have had these mummies if
That's
they had
incredible.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So there were people looking after history even back then.
Yeah, which is so important, and we need to do the same.
Oh yeah, instead of destroying statues and ripping things down, we should be looking after them. Just one quick thing, he made many monuments, and one of the things that he's famously inscribed and created and ordered to be made was an obelisk, a very unique one, which now sits in Rome. It's called the Lateran obelisk, and it was actually built during the reign, or made during the reign of Tutmosis III, and famously has traveled all over the world. It was taken there by a Roman emperor. I think it was Constantius II, who took it from Egypt, put it on a ship. I mean, this is no small task, those things are heavy and they break very easily. If you haven't noticed, they're very tall, they're very thin. It's not exactly the easiest thing to move around. And they moved this to Rome.
Romans, did they think they owned it?
Unbelievable. And they did. They moved these things around. I mean, it's still standing famously in Rome, and is something that would have been familiar to Tutmosis III.
But I think there were a few, Gareth. There's one in London, and there's one in New York. It's called the Cleopatra's
Needle. Yeah, even though it's got nothing to do with Cleopatra.
Yeah, look, I think the Cleopatra era, which was the Ptolemies, that wasn't great. A little bit like Habsburgs, their noses were skew, and they had one ear that was on top of their head from inbreeding.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Egyptians were particularly good at that stuff. In fact, one of the reasons they say that he defaced so much of Hatshepsut's stuff was because there were a lot of Hatshepsut's relatives around who would have an equally good claim to the throne. And by doing this, by kind of diminishing her historically, he was able to make his own son, Amenhotep, seem more
important. Which makes sense, yeah.
But what a guy, huh? I mean, if you're going to be an Egyptian pharaoh, let it be him or Ramesses. There are no real other contenders for this title.
Agreed, 100%.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Blind History. Every episode is available on the Cliff Central app, cliffcentral.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the next episode, this guy, if we had to look at the big picture, he really was the guy who decided, let's run this as a business. There's money to be made. Stop fighting with each other and let's make this work. Organized crime, not disorganized crime.